Welcome everyone to our webinar Wednesday. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Phelps and I'm the marketing director here at Acumen. And today we brought in Nick Nabosny, who is our Sage Intacct Practice Director, and Brian Puckett, who is our Senior Consultant, to give you an introduction and demonstration of Sage Intacct Planning. But before we begin, please note that this webinar is in listen-only mode. And if you have any questions, then please use the chat option. We'll answer near the end of the presentation. And with that, let's move on to the agenda. So in today's webinar, we'll explore how Sage Intacct Planning brings you more speed, productivity, accuracy, and easier collaboration to your planning process, whether you have Sage 300 or Sage Intacct, by starting off with a solution overview. From there, Nick will touch on how SIP differentiates itself from other tools in the market by going over the functionality and the life cycle of the solution. After that, we'll review the different user types and how they are managed by different job roles from each company. Then lastly, show you a live demonstration of Sage Intacct Planning before answering questions near the end. We have a lot in store for you today, so I will now pass it on to Nick.
Thanks, Stephen. So for those of you who are new to Sage Intacct Planning, or even new to kind of planning as a whole, I'd like to take just a few quick minutes to introduce SIP or Sage Intacct Planning at a 30,000-foot level before we get into the demonstration. I promise not to bore you with too many slides, but I do want to set the scene as what it can do. What do clients use this for? Where does it fit? And so Sage Intacct Planning is a robust financial planning tool for businesses who truly want to understand and honestly trust their numbers. The four main components of the tool are planning, budgeting, forecasting, and reporting, which allows you to manage the entire FP&A lifecycle. And still, we're going to talk more about those details later, but it provides an option to put an end to your budgeting and planning spreadsheet nightmares once and for all. And we've seen a lot of those out there, right? And us here as well. We use spreadsheets for tons of things. And this is a tool that really can put an end to that. And although the product is called Sage Intacct Planning, and it started as a tool for Sage Intacct only, it does fully integrate with Sage 300, as Stephen mentioned. So all of the clients on this call, whether you're running Sage Intacct or Sage 300, will certainly be able to benefit from this tool. Now, what sets it apart? What differentiates SIP? So really, it's a few of the core principles, in my opinion, are what makes it a tool that you'd want to use and make you ditch those spreadsheets. One, it's self-discoverable. It's easy to navigate and use without the need for programming or IT resources. Two, it's connected. It's seamless integration with both Intacct and Sage 300 general ledgers, which allows you to leverage your dimensions, your segments, your structured codes, and other data in the Sage 300 general ledger or Sage Intacct general ledger to quickly build a budget within minutes. And it also easily allows you to enhance that budget with external data that may currently be sourced in Excel. And thirdly, it's powerful. It's built for finance and accounting users, allowing them to develop budgets using key business drivers and create what-if scenarios and build rolling forecasts all on the fly. And then lastly, it's collaborative. It provides the ability to share budgets and forecasts with team members, colleagues, executives, and allow them to really assist in the creation and management of the budget by participating in data entry for their respective teams, by filling in their information for their cost center or divisions or headcounts. And this really includes non-finance users. They don't have to be technical users to help and do that kind of entry. Now, the FP&A life cycle is really supported by those core principles in SIP, and it really allows you to have that continuous planning cycle that we see here on the screen. When we take a look at our budgeting or planning cycle, it's really meant to be revisited on a regular basis, and not just that annual event, that kind of one time you set the budget. That's certainly important, right? That's certainly needed as a starting position, but the entire tool here, the entire FP&A lifecycle, allows you to plan, to analyze, to forecast and report, and continuously monitor and change and adjust, and monitor and change and adjust. And so having a system that allows you to do planning, analysis, reporting, and forecasting throughout the year provides you with the ability to shift from a reactive mindset, looking at the results after the fact, to a more proactive mindset, which is really a game changer for any organization. And a lot can change throughout the year, right? Whether it's a business mission change, it's a change in customer demand, could be a change in outside factors. We've seen that over the last few years, certainly, right? And honestly, there's a whole slew of reasons why this process should be revisited on a regular basis. And again, not just an annual event. So as Stephen mentioned, now we want to talk about the pieces or the components of what makes up Sage Intacct Planning, right? And so it's not that complex, but I thought it'd be worth a minute just to kind of explain who in your organization might need to look at this, who might use it. So the platform, right? That's the core application. That includes everything we've just talked about, the solution to do budgets, to do forecasts, to do your what ifs, to do your complex analysis, to do your reporting. That's all included in the platform or the core application. And then the other three boxes here are just different user types in the system. The first is an owner, or you may see it called a creator license, and that provides the ability to create, edit, and delete budgets, including what if scenarios. Creator users can also manage permissions and security for all other user types, and have also full rights to create and manage any kind of centralized calculations. Those are calculations that you might set up in advance to use in various different areas of your budget or planning life cycle. The contributor user is kind of at the middle level. That's a user that might be able to enter and view budgets, right? So they'll do some help. They'll participate by entering information or variables for you. They can also view budgets that they have security or permissions for, and those are, of course, set by that owner or creator user. And then lastly is a viewer license, and that's restricted to viewing budget information based on any restrictions or permissions set, again, by that creator user. So only able to see the budgets that they're allowed to see, and not anything else in the system. So three different, very different levels of users that you might need to consider for your organization as to who's going to participate, who's just going to view information, who's going to be a kind of a master user and control security for other people. And then lastly, before we get into the demonstration, just wanted to kind of put a slide up. I really like this slide because a few of these things here are things that Brian's going to cover in the demonstration, and just wanted to point out a few of my favorites because one, the intuitive design, and for those of you that have seen Intacct, it follows a similar look and feel to Intacct, but it really allows you to get started with Intacct Planning, SIP, in a matter of hours or days, and really not months. Next, the Intelligent Planning Wizard is the tool that automatically pulls in your GL actuals, including dimensional values and segment values, allowing you to start putting together some plans with financial reports and dashboards together to help understand what's currently driving your results. Again, coming back to truly understanding your results and trusting your results. And last but certainly not least, the what if scenario modeling allows you to easily generate a few different scenarios to evaluate based on variables you've entered into the system. Whether, again, that's customer changes, but a change in your business mission, a change in outside environmental factors, whatever that is, you can build those into these what if scenarios and use the tool again to kind of help move forward accordingly. So now let's go ahead and turn it over to Brian, who's going to take us for a tour of the solution. So I'll stop sharing, Brian, and over to you.
All right. Can you all see the, Nick, can you guys see the Sage Intacct Planning here?
Yes. Looks good on our end.
We sure can. We're good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, so Nick pointed out some key highlights. I really want to kind of touch upon that. Also, one of the things I initially here want to note is you'll notice right now I'm in Sage Intacct Planning. This is for an environment Goodway Healthcare. This is a totally different application, and it's completely independent of Sage Intacct itself. So if I go back over to the actual Intacct instance where I extracted data from here to get into Sage Intacct Planning, the connectivity is very quick and easy to bridge the two applications together. Basically, what you have to do is go under your company configuration here, and then under the security tab, if you go down to the web service authorizations, you put in this Bajetta MPP web service authorization, and then that gets you connectivity to Sage Intacct Planning. If you become a Sage Intacct Planning subscriber or user, they will send you a login very similar to what you get with a normal Intacct instance, and you will be able to log into Sage Intacct Planning, and with this connectivity created, you'll be able to move data back and forth between Sage Intacct Planning and Sage Intacct itself. And so there's a few different ways you can load data into Sage Intacct Planning. To me, the most optimal, as Nick pointed out, when you load data, you have the ability to pull in dimensions and all of your chart of accounts with an import. And if you do that, basically you're pulling a budget from Intacct right here under the budget tab under budget repository. And so, for example, I have used this current year Sage Intacct budget, and I say current year, you get into the details. It's actually 2018, but this is a demo environment we've had out here for a little bit. But so you can use the normal budget import template to load a budget here in Intacct, and then take that budget that lives here and move it to Sage Intacct Planning. So how you facilitate that is to go into Sage Intacct Planning, and here you have the option here to load a new budget. So I would click this, and there's three different ways to get budget data in. And the first is what I'm going to walk through. I'm not sure I'm going to post the full budget, given I don't want to slow down everything we cover in the demo, and it takes a few minutes to refresh. But using the My Sage Intacct data, and that's loading that budget instance that I mentioned. Or if somebody has created a Sage Intacct Planning file for you, so maybe you have a team member, or you have of our partner like us, we could build you a budget instance and then export it down as a SIP file, send it to you, and then you would import it, and you would have the same budget data and structure that we had built for you. Otherwise, Sage Intacct Planning does have Excel templates that you can export down and populate data, GL accounts, dimension combinations with your actual month-to-month amounts that you would put in a budget, and then upload it that way. The thing I don't like about this is that you're loading the data, and maybe your data is missing 2 departments or 3 locations in the initial budget. Excuse me, it's only going to load. It's going to be missing that when you do your import. You'll have to go in and manually add those dimensions. But when you load the data from Sage Intacct Planning, you have the ability to request picking up all of that dimension data. And so it will not only build a budget structure for you, but it's going to load all the data, including dimensions. And to me, I find that really helpful. And then once you get a budget in play, you can then also upload actuals to be able to compare against it, which we'll look at here on the back end of our presentation. So, so just to kind of follow the menu, if I did want to load from Sage Intacct, basically I would progress through a set of menus here, a set of screens. This is where I can give my budget a name. So we could just call this SIP demo, or let me back up. I am actually connecting, got ahead of myself here. So I need the company ID here. This is actually getting me connected initially to the Intacct instance. And so, like I said, the way it did it was with having that web service user, and then you have to have a user ID, obviously, and into Intacct, which I'm using right here, to be able to get connected to my Sage Intacct instance. So I'm going to tell it to import all entities. You'll see in this demo environment, there's 5 entities. If I wanted a single entity, I could pick one, but we'll load everything. If we were to fully load this, this is what I was looking for. We would give this a name. If you're a nonprofit, you'd load this, select this nonprofit option. If you're a for-profit business, you'd select this. And basically the difference is that it will give you your financial statements in the for-profit format versus the company format. Very similar to what Intacct does in terms of how the financials are shown for a nonprofit operation versus a for-profit. So we'll leave it at that. Now, if we were going to load a full budget for 2023, we would set this date range like it is right here. And this is where you can pull in all your dimension data that you want. So like I said, the other approach of loading with an Excel spreadsheet, if all of that data set doesn't include a department or a location or vendor, you're going to have to manually load that on the back end. But here, you can literally load everything that you want. By default, it gets location because it needs that to have your data dimensionalized or part of the structure with that included. I'm just going to select those for now to be able to pull through. Now, this here would allow you, if you had employee records, and when I say that, I'm talking about in Intacct, if you had the employee dimension populated with employee records, you have the ability to use this option here and say yes, and it will import employee data into Intacct. And so you could then budget by employee for not only salaries and wages, but for bonuses, payroll taxes, benefits, 401k contributions, et cetera, or 401k matches, and so forth. I'm going to show you that in another environment. So I'm going to say no to this. If you say no, you won't get the employee load, but it will load the salary, expenses, payroll taxes, et cetera, all the budget lines that would have it, but it would be at the GL account level by whatever the budget tree you create is broken out as. So then I would hit next here. I would have the opportunity to take any GL account or combinations of account and Intacct and merge them as a budget line, as you see here, right here. So if I wanted to just create one cost of goods sold in my budget that was a combination of 2 lines, I could do something like this. And I could just say, this is cost of goods sold, and apply that. And it's now going to take those 2 lines, create a part of the budget structure, those combined as cost of goods sold. I don't see that happen often. Most people want to use the line by line details to work with their budget, but Intacct does give you this, this option. So this is where you would then determine how you want your budget structure built out. And you can see you have the ability to set that on 4 different tiers as part of your P&L structure. At the revenue level, cost of revenue, OPEX, and then your other income and expense lines. So let's just say you want to budget by location, then department, which is what we see often. Sometimes we'll see department and location. I basically just drag this over to set that structure to be built. And let's just say maybe cost of revenue, you don't need to get as detailed. You could maybe, you're not worried about location. You could do that only by department. And then OPEX, you could go back to location and then departments. Sub-departments or sub-locations would be if you have any parent-child relationship. So if you had parent departments and then sub-departments underneath it, that's what the sub-departments are. And so you can do that with dimension or departments and location dimensions. And then lastly, the below line adjustments, maybe again, we only care about departments. Intacct used to minimize this to just 2 different options here. Now, if I wanted to really slice and dice my data, and maybe by projects, I wanted a project detail underneath departments, I can do that. I can cut this as many ways as I want. Now, you get to a point of diminishing returns that if you have so many iterations broken down by department and project combinations, do you really have your data to that detail? If you don't want to really build the structure this way. So you really want this to be consistent with how you've built your budget data. In essence, what dimensions has the budget instance been built on to really drive how you build this out. So I would take this out in most instances. So then it's asking me, how do I want to populate my budget? Or do I want to populate it based on actuals and or budgets from Sage Intacct? And so I'm going to say yes to this. And now it's going to allow me to determine what I'm going to populate the data with. And so I can pick the fiscal year that I want, to load with the budget, or load as my budget. If I came back here because it looks like there's some actuals up through July of 2022, that if you wanted to do a combination of actuals and budget, I could do this. And then it would, require me to select a budget version. So if I did this, I'd get 7 months of actuals because it's through July. This would be 6. You notice I can move it there. Of my actuals, and then the remaining 6 months would be driven off of this SM current year budget that we saw over here. This guy right here. Well, that guy. I can pick any of them, but anyways, but normally most people will do all actuals or they'll do all budget. So in this case, if I wanted to take a budget instance, I would do this. I'd take 2023 that I want to establish this with, and I'll use my current year Sage Intacct. Even though that's a few years back in terms of budget data, I would hit next. I would have the opportunity here to take the budget itself and maybe on all the revenue lines, I want to build in a 5% revenue increase. We'd all love 50%, wouldn't we? But if you want to have a bump and a change, it'll do that for every line that is in the revenue category or any of these other categories. Again, I don't see this used often, but the feature's there if you ever want to use it to just do an initial growth or run rate beyond the initial budget or the actuals that you're building out. This would make more sense if you're building out your actuals and you want to build in some uptick in revenue, maybe a 10% revenue trend and OpEx growth of 3 to 5%, and use that as your initial budget build. And then from there, you can go in and manually massage the numbers, which I'll show you how we'll be able to do that here in a moment. Then I would hit next, and it's actually going to build out it's going to offer up, do I want to include the lines that do not have historic data or remove them? Most people will remove them, but if you wanted the full budget structure, you would leave this unchecked. And this is basically what your budget tree would look like. If I removed it, it flattens it out. You'll notice it marks off everything where there's no historic data. So if I wanted to get this completed, I would hit finish and it would build me out a budget for me. I'm not going to do that here because I don't want to slow up everything and wait on this. So I'm going to actually move to, if a budget has been created, what it looks like and how you can massage it from there. But I'm going to stop there for a minute. Is there, Nick, Stephen, is there any questions that anybody's put in the chat?
Not yet. I think for now we're pretty good, so we can keep moving along.
All right, so once a budget is created, we would be able to, it would basically land here where you have a full budget. Now, this is kind of, I have it summarized right here, but you'll notice this budget is telling me, since I'm at the very top level, I have net income of $1.3 million based on the budget build that was done here. Do I have actuals in this? I don't think I do. I have one of them. I'll flip to showing you the actuals here in just a second. Oh, this one is the one with actuals. So you'll notice I can toggle between budget and actuals. We'll focus on the budget for now, and then I'll show you some comparisons of doing budget versus actuals. So I can expand this out. You'll notice I can expand my 4 different sections of the budget tree, the budget structure. And so at a high level, my revenues right here come in at 6.373. And then here are my 5 entities that when we built this out, I selected to do all entities. And then we did departments underneath, which kick in the OpEx area. But if I want to see how this revenue is distributed, I can go under a given entity and I can select a GL account line. So make it a little bit easier to see this. Here are 3 revenue lines under Accord Health here. This happens to be 2.1 million here with it. And this is built off of starting with $150,000 with a 3% growth rate. So there's basically 3 different ways to get budget data either in the system or massage it once it's here. So if I wanted to change this, so you'll notice it's growing 3% per month to the end of the year. So by year end, the month-to-month amount is 207,635 based on this. I can also enter in the data, either load it straight up with raw numbers, but once it's over here, I can update it with that growth rate. I can do same amount and then plug in that amount. So there's the 150. If I wanted to make that 175, quite simply, I just change that number, save it. And so now my run rate per month is at 175. The other thing I can do is, if I know I'm going to have variability in my numbers, I can change this over to different amount for each billing. And then I can go in and put in the numbers on a month-to-month basis. So I wanted this to be 100,000, this to be 150. You'll notice you can tab through and have it update the numbers. So you could do that very quickly and then go, okay, I want this to be 180,000. I can save this. So now I've got numbers with that varying amounts on a month-to-month basis. In addition to that, when this was built out, it pulls in your dimension data that was tagged to the line. So this was tagged to Accord Health. We'll look at expenses. There'll be departments tagged to it as well. But if you wanted to tag additional dimension data here, you could. You know, if you wanted to add research for this as a project dimension, you could do that. And I could save that. And now I have this broken out. And then if I wanted to then quickly make another entry here that would have a different project, I can come here and I can essentially duplicate the line. And then I can rename this. Take out the copy of in front. And then we'll call, this might be with project ABC, whatever it is. We could save this and then change this to whatever project we want it to be. So clinical trials. So if we do that, then, we'd probably want to rename this. Oops. to clinical. And then we could go in and update the numbers to whatever we wanted here. So maybe we want the same amount each month, and this is 50,000. Now, there's one other step when you manually insert lines into here. You'll notice the GL account number is tagged to the data that was loaded because it had a GL account tag to it when it imported, as you're loading a budget that's got the GL account, the location, the department in most cases. This is not here. That's not here the case. So here's what we basically have to do to get that tagged so it's now part of a GL account line. So you have to go to the Actuals tab here and then go under Mapping. And I believe we put that in Private Insurance. So what you would do is select this area, and then I could type a search and look for a description that matches what I put in. So you'll see right there, this is the guy we want to add. All these other ones are already part of that line. I can select that. And now if we go back to our inputs table, notice now it has oh, no, here it is. It has a line assigned to it to 40100. So it's important as you add lines into manually add things, you then tag them to the proper GL account. And most people, maintenance like this is pretty rare and pretty minimal because they load that budget up front and it's going to give them by and large what they want to do to start with. The other thing you can do with these, not only can you add, but if I decide that maybe this needs to be in the ISTA group, or I'm sorry, location, I can come down here and do move, and I can move it under revenue ISTA. So if we do that, notice it's disappeared here. And if I come into here, here it is. Or maybe it's this one. Yep, we did the same amount right here. And it's also then updated my department accordingly, dropped it into the correct department with that change. So you can see maintenance on this is really pretty easy, but most people, once they load a budget, they're going to fine tune their data, mostly massaging numbers and not having to do a lot of account adds and movement and that type of thing. But I can go department by department to look at, each of the categories. If I come down here to cost of revenue, you'll notice the only expense amounts that exist here are with the 50100 account, COGS medical supplies. It will tell you if there is no data in these other ones straight up. So I can see I've got data here, but I come down to here, there's nothing that was telling me that. So at this point, I could add data if I wanted to, and put something in and save it. And then once I do that, you'll notice now the no data goes away. And then if you come down to your OpEx, a couple things I want to point out here. If you loaded your personnel data, it will live. I'll duplicate this to show you. The actual head count yep, here we go. Will show up right here. So if you load this from Intacct, it's getting it from the employee dimensions. It'll pull the name, their title, start date, end dates if they have left the organization, salary information, how their bonus is paid, if they're paid a bonus, employee ID if you have that populated within Intacct, and then dimension data out here to the far right. So And so that then pushes to the budget structure. So as you see here, Karen Chin is in the AeroSurf department. So if I come over here, there's the AeroSurf department. And at a high level, I'm looking at a summary right now because I'm up here at this tab. It's telling me I've got one employee and these are the total expenses for that one employee. But I could come down and look at the employee and then change this to details. And it will give me the breakout in terms of how I'm getting to my my expenses on a month-to-month basis. So she's got base comp at 9,400, benefits at 282, and a bonus payout of 940. And those numbers come from this. A benefit has been plugged in at 3, bonus at 10. So, you know, you literally, if you wanted to change this, whoops, cancel that. I will do it this way. Change that to 12. Then that bonus amount, it went from $900 and some to 1,128. Now, wherever you see this FX, what you can do is, and we see this quite often, I don't really have any in here, but this is an example. We go into this budget example right here. You can create modeling assumptions. And so you see here, they have created benefits assumptions at 7%, bonus amount at 8.5%, annual compensation increase at 5%. So what that gives them the ability to do is, on an employee level, is go to a particular employee and you can grab that benefit assumption. So I could grab that benefit here. I think it was already, whoops, it was already there. Yeah, the benefits USA, hit done, and it's going to calculate based on that percentage that we had. So you see this at $1,167. If for some reason, and you tag all your employees with the base modeled calculation, the beauty of this is you can go and change this at the model level and it will propagate all the way across to everywhere it's tagged. So if you have this tag to 50 employees, you update this number once and it'll update the 50 times it's referenced in the budget. So I go back into here and go back to that employee, those benefits amount. Somebody was asking, does the system track annual increases at an employee's anniversary? I believe the merit increases are based on how you set it for your calculation year, I believe, but there may be a way to change that. That'll be something I'll have to find out for you. Normally it's driven off of the employee data. And the year to year and how you budget, but there are what we call advanced benefits. And let me see if you can build that out. So you can also do benefits this way instead of modeling. Occurs monthly. Yeah, I'll have to find out for you on that in terms of whether you can drive it off of employee anniversary instead of the budget cycle. So I'll get an answer to that and we'll relay that to you after this session to be able to answer to that. But really what I wanted to emphasize is the importance and the value of doing modeling. You know, so much where you're having to jam formulas into Excel and you know, remember where you put them, update them in multiple places. This eliminates that issue because, again, you can build global assumptions and tag them at the employee level or tag any kind of assumptions throughout in your build out of a budget. For example, other things you can do in addition to like HR related assumptions, you've got several different ones that you can pull from their Intacct library. As you see, that could be cost of revenue drivers, headcount related, that kind of stuff that you can pull. But in this example, one thing that they did here was built out revenue calculations based on unit sales. So these are bookings plans based on units. And then these are the dollar value of sale for each unit. And then down below, it built out a revenue projection month to month, as you see here, based on the per unit sale and the monthly projected sales. And so these three, as you see where it says linked, they were tagged to a budget line in the budget. So once you have these assumptions built out, let me show you what you can do. So we could take like this large US bookings large, it's not linked at this point. So we could go back into the budget and then we could find a revenue line, and you can see that one's done that. See, it says revenue from model. So if we go here, you can see instead of just being like this guy, it's just a budgeted entry with these amounts, same amount here, with a looks like same amount, and then they've got a looks like a percentage on the support add-on, and then they've got support periods for 12 months and then a 10% churn. So that's why you're seeing a movement of the numbers there. But if we just literally wanted to change this to from the model, one of those assumptions we built out, we can change it to revenue from model and go in here and select that model line. There we go. So I think that was the US bookings large was the one I was going to add there. So now it's getting that model assumption build out that we did. So you can build out models and then tag them to revenue or expense lines, or you can use assumptions that, as we saw, can be tagged to headcount assumptions and done that way. I did a project a year or so ago, and the client literally laid out, did for about 120 employees, we did a detailed modeling forecast for salaries and wages, bonuses, payroll taxes, employee benefits, and then like 401k matches. And so we had we built out, did all the modeling for the base assumptions, and then we tagged them to every employee. And again, the value of it is when you build out these assumptions, at a global level, you just update one number, and everywhere they're referenced, the numbers will recalibrate for you. Not quite as easy to do that kind of thing in Excel. So anyway, so that's kind of the general mechanics of the budget structure, the budget tree. Again, you've got all your op expenses as it loaded, and you can go to a particular area here and again see the amount. So there's the roll up of all OpEx expenses. Here's what it is for Accord Health, and as you just keep drilling down, you can get into that granular number. So this is where you're going to be kind of doing the heavy lifting of updating and maintaining your budget. But in terms of once you build a budget or you want to eyeball what's going on as you do updates and massage numbers, you come in here to this sheet section. This is basically Sage Intacct Planning's reporting section, at least details. We'll get to dashboards here in a minute. So this is all data right now. This is budget only. But as you see here, I can change this to get a look to do budget versus actuals. And because I have loaded actuals in this environment. And so once this recalibrates here, now I can compare month to month, my budget versus actuals, and as well get a total global look here. And so if I want to explode out the details, I can drill down and get details in terms of how are we getting to those net numbers. So, again, you can break down your op expenses. And so if you get a view that you want to be able to work with in Excel, come over here to create report, do a current view with Excel, hit create, and it will do a quick export of this. So I'll move over here out to Excel. So a little bit busy, but at the end of the day, you can get a look of the data with the data that you want to output very quickly. I mean, it's a matter of clicking a couple buttons and you can get an outputted look there of whatever view you want. While you're in here, a few other things you can do with this is that you can filter by dimensions. So if I wanted to see only Accord Health, I can filter by that, and it'll recalibrate these numbers for me with Accord Health. And again, with actuals in here, it takes a little bit longer here to refresh. But here's my P&L with Accord Health only. So, let's see here. So the other thing you can do with this is not only location, dimensions, departments, but if there's dimensions on here you don't ever want to use or using this filtering, you can basically remove them. So if you know you're never going to use members, take it out. You're never going to use projects, take it out. And so that way you're not confusing users with extra stuff here. You can run this by account. So if we want to run this by a revenue account, there's my revenue number, and then obviously it calculates a gross profit with no expenses tagged to it and net income with that particular account. So if we go pick an expense account instead, I want categories, I need to go to expenses. Let's change this to depreciation expense. Now it's going to give me an OpEx number and then a net loss based on it being an expense item. You can also use these categories where, oops, moved on me. So as you load data to expense categories that you can create, or some of the defaults that Intacct gives you, I can do salaries and benefits. Instead of selecting by GL account, it does it by these categories here. So a lot of cool things that you can slice and dice your data with and look at it in different views. But this is kind of your main report driver here under Sheets. And then I'll jump over here to dashboards real quick, and then I want to leave time for questions. You can also create these dashboards. Again, you have the ability to add different dashboards from some that Intacct gives you. So like revenue, you can look at revenue, stacked by department or location. You can change the chart once you load it, revenue growth on a growth trend basis. You can look at expenses different ways, headcount, you can do revenue per FTE, kind of tracking, some KPI tracking here. Basically, you add them on here, and then when you have your widget added to the dashboard, you can go into an individual one and change the setting. Like if I wanted that to be a basic column instead of a stacked, I could change it like that. And I can also, as you saw there, not only change the type, I can change the view monthly to quarterly or yearly. I can change the date range. I can do a budget only. I can do budget versus actuals. So this will give you side-by-side comparisons of budget versus actuals once it refreshes. There we go. So there's your, you can even click on it there. It'll tell you there's your OpEx budget, the green number, and then the blue number with the budget. So you can see the budget numbers running a little bit higher. not really what you want on the OpEx, but again, this is just test data. The good news is the revenue is running on a positive trend line as well. But you have the ability to set these, and then you can move them around in terms of how they're displayed as well once you do this. And again, being able to do comparisons. Rolling would be if I had a combination of 6 months of actuals and 6 months of a budget or forecast, it would give you that rolling look. So speaking of forecast, one other thing I want to show you before I stop for questions is you build a budget, or you get a budget built out. This does have the ability to have multiple iterations. And so once you build a budget, you save it as a base budget. And then from there, as you progress through the year, and maybe halfway through the year, you want to load 6 months of actuals and then reproject out your budget with a forecast for the remaining 6 months. I could save a forecast version that has that. And then I have the ability to have different versions to be able to do comparisons with. So this will, whether you reforecast 2 times a year or 5 times a year or 10 times a year, monthly, whatever, you can have iterative forecasts throughout the year to be able to compare against actuals and a base budget. And then one other thing real quickly is if you have what if scenarios where, let's just say that you want to just take a quick look at, hey, what if I bumped some revenue numbers, by 5%? What's the bottom line look like with that change? So you create a scenario, and maybe I can go in here and I'll bump this to growth, and we'll change this from that straight run rate that we had, and we'll do a 5% growth rate on this. And I can save this. And, so there's an uptick in my numbers, which would mean there'd be an uptick in the net income number. So if we go back here and we take a look at this Acumen Goodway as it was. So it looks like the net income here, net income is $1,346,000. In this scenario, I made a change, and there may be some other changes. Did I select the right? Yeah, good way. This is actually up to almost $1,600,000. If I like the change I made, now obviously I could go through here and make other ones. I can literally, I got 2 options. I can cancel this and go back to my original budget, or I could actually go back to here and say, you know what, I want this to be updated in my budget. I can then do merge with budget, and then this is now layered into my budget with that change. So there's that increased number there. So I'm going to stop right there. I want to leave time for questions. Looks like there's a few of them that have come in here. Somebody asked, when you exported out the P&L, the differences were all blank. Is that normal with the export? Do I have my file here? Let's take a look. There they are. I don't know if I left it on that other view, but there's your numbers. So I didn't think that was the case, that they wouldn't have it, but once I enable the full view and access to the data, it's here. So are you able to view week to week instead of month? I don't think so. I think the only options, we go back to sheets, are monthly, quarterly, and yearly. I don't think they've gotten that granular yet. Yep. Yeah, monthly, quarterly, yearly. That's it. So nothing week to week at this point.
Thanks, Brian. Another question that we had that came in, I said, can a budget have multiple editors?
Yes, budget can have multiple editors. Nick talked about the different types of users that you can set up within Intacct. And so, or within Sage Intacct Planning. So if we go back to our budget tree, you can add your users here and they can have, so when we talked about creators and modifiers and then just the basic view, so those that can just go in and view data, you would set them up this way, put the email address in here. If they're going to be a modifier, you have these advanced options. You can go in and give them to a working budget, or whether they can update scenarios, that type of thing. But you can also, so that would be a global setting, but literally you can go down to a department level. Maybe you have an employee that's only responsible for AeroSurf operating expenses. You can go down to this portion of the budget and set share permissions only for AeroSurf OpExes. And then, you can choose to give them permissions to headcount, whether to give them the ability to have access to a few other things here. Excluding certain lines, you could set exclusions with, and that type of thing. But yes, you can have multiple users that have different permissions, or have permissions to different portions of the budget if you want to get that selective.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. I think due to time, I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap up now. So again,
Okay.
if you guys, thank you all for joining us today. If you guys do have any additional questions, then please contact us at am@acumenfl.com, or you can give us a call at 407-965-2411. If you haven't yet, please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook for upcoming events, webinars, and the latest content related to Sage. In addition, also please be on the lookout for the new webinar schedule, which will be coming out soon. So with that, that's all we have for you today. So thanks again, Nick and Brian, for the great presentation. And we hope to see you all again on our next webinar Wednesday.